Yes, guys, we're talking today about Cooper Duff-Tytler. He is a man in demand at the moment, and for me at least, the front runner for the number one pick in the 2025 draft. And the peculiarity around that is regarding the fact that he is a 200 centimeter ruck prospect. He's a key position prospect as well. But you just don't see those players go right at the pointy end of the draft. And I think that's got people talking, debating about whether you should take a player in that position. And it also comes down to the idea of, I guess, player versus position when you are talking about draft picks as well. Are you drafting the person and the player and the attributes that they have, or are you drafting the position on the field? And we're kind of going to get into that in this video. I'm going to break this down sort of in, I guess, three ways. So I'm going to look at like historic picks and how they've gone as far as picking ruckman, picking key position players. We're also going to look at the ruck position and how that's changed over time and if that has an effect on whether you would take a ruck. And then I'm also going to talk about Cooper Duff-Tytler himself, the attributes that he brings and why, potentially you should or you shouldn't draft him in this upcoming draft in November. If we have a little bit of a look at some history and some context around both the ruck position in the draft and key position players in the draft as well, it does tend to tell a story a little bit, I guess, about how clubs and recruiters feel about these types of players. There has only been one ruck or pure ruck ever taken with the number one pick, and that was Matthew Cruiser back in 2007. And I think he probably plays into people's psyche a little bit with this. They think about Cruiser, and it probably overall was a little bit of a failure as a pick for the Blues, taking him with number one. And I guess future rucks coming through, they get sort of painted with the Cruiser curse, I suppose. But I think it largely plays more into the fact that Cruiser was very injury prone during his career. He was playing in weaker Carlton sides as well. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. Nick Naitanui was a very successful pick as a pure ruck in the 2008 draft. He was taken at pick 2. And there's been a number of other key position players taken with the overall number one pick that have been a big success. Recently, Aaron Cadman, who I guess the jury is still out on him overall with his career, but he looks like a real player. Jamari Ugle-Hagan had a lot of talent as a 2020 pick 1. Jacob Wietering, obviously a gun key position defender that you would obviously take again as a number one pick. Then you've had a few failures like Patton, McCartan through the middle 2000s there that didn't go to plan. And I think overall, the thing that you will find is there is a little bit more risk attached to taking a key position player. They have that longer maturation period where they have to put on a lot of size and the body contact and those sorts of things that they need to get up to the level of AFL is more. So there's a bigger gap between them coming in, playing under 18 football and then coming into the AFL through strength and size and all of those sorts of things than like a 180 centimeter midfielder. So that has to be taken into consideration, and it adds a layer of risk to the overall question when you're talking about this. So there is that risk attached to taking key position players and rucks. Of course, there's a lower strike rate, but you do have to weigh up the difference making that they can do on game day. You look at a player like Sam Darcy, what he's been able to do this season as, when he's playing on some of those key position defenders, he just looks like he can move that much better and he can be a real difference maker for you and tip you over the edge to winning games. And even if you're using that exact position, the ruck position, a player like Max Gawn, if you were able to redraft him again, he was taken at pick 34 years ago, but if you could redraft him, you'd obviously take him given his career and what he's put together as a clear number one pick as well. I think the other thing we have to talk about when we talk about Cooper Duff-Tytler and his possibility of being drafted as a pure ruck is the position and the changes that have taken place to that over the last few years. It was the beginning of the 2024 season that probably changed the ruck position forever. And that was the AFL changing the rule of the ruck to allowing straight arm blocks. So it was straight arm blocks will be permitted in a ruck contest provided the player contests the ball. And this really did change the ruck position. It changed the recruiting philosophy around the ruck position. The idea of recruiting these older style, sort of skinnier, taller rucks that had a lot of craft at actually winning taps, that changed, and you saw a lot of rucks that came in with just more physicality and strength come into the position because they were able to tie those more athletic rucks down. Think of a player like Tristan Sherry who's come into the game recently. His ruck craft is mostly based on strength, and he can just sort of beat you in a wrestle and then tap the ball to a one-on-one contest at the stoppage, and North are able to sort of benefit from that. Lloyd Meeks won at Hawthorn, a similar one where he doesn't really jump at the ball, but he's just able to stand his ground and have that physicality to beat you out, and then get it to those runners, get it to those contests inside the centre circle. And that's changed significantly. I mean, you're not looking, I guess that takes away, at least at the stoppage source, it takes away from the potential gain that you can get from that position with ruck craft. So recruiters aren't necessarily looking at ruck craft anymore. They're more looking at things like physicality and then what you can do outside the stoppage, which is probably the biggest change to the position overall. I think when you're talking about those rule changes and what that's done to the position, it's made recruiters even more hesitant to want to take a ruck with a really high draft pick, because it's a little bit like, okay, what's their primary job? It is to win hitouts. It's to have that craft, and that's been taken away from them. They've been disarmed a little bit in that sense. And then recruiters go, well, we can just kind of get a big physical presence in there, someone that can compete and try to go after ground balls and those sorts of things. But I think at the same time, again, you're trying to remove the player from the position a little bit there, and what else can they do? And I think Cooper Duff-Tytler offers so much else on the outside of that, away from the contest, that you probably can overlook that overall. But as far as the conversation around the position versus the player, you are starting to look at that ruck position as somewhere where you can't necessarily get such an advantage like you used to be able to get. Now, really, when we're assessing rucks and we're looking at statistics and those sorts of things, it's rare we actually go to things like hit outs and we look at hit outs as a big advantage. We really just go to that overall clearance number now. So how many clearances are your team winning? And the ruck is just a part of that. And that's them following up, getting those ground balls, helping in transition, those sorts of things. So what the ruck is doing probably outside the contest, their post-clearance contested possession, those sorts of numbers are the big thing. And then if they're able to go forward, push back into defense, take intercept marks, take contested marks, that's the difference maker for this position. So the next question is, what does Cooper Duff-Tytler actually bring to this ruck position at AFL? Is he even going to be a ruck when he gets to the AFL? Could he actually be drafted more as a pure key forward? Those things are all still possibilities. He's a 200 centimetre utility I see him at the moment. He's got a lot of upside. He's played predominantly so far this season as a ruck that sort of goes into the forward line at different times. But the one thing that stood out about Cooper Duff-Tytler's game to me is his skills with the ball in hand. So when he's actually got the ball, he's receiving the ball, he's getting involved in chains outside the stoppage, he actually moves and operates more like you see a midfielder do. And I think probably the player at AFL level that you could sort of compare him to a little bit here is probably a Tim English. And when you hear that, you're probably going to think, okay, maybe he lacks physicality. He doesn't lack physicality. He's one of the most brutal key position players that I've seen. I think he's working at stoppage, how he can sort of just bowl people over, smash into people. He goes into the forward half of the ground. His contest work is really good. He stands up strong, and he's not afraid to attack the ball first and foremost. So I think that fundamental is there. But what he offers you compared to most key position players is that clarity on the ball. He's able to hit passes. He's able to pick up ground balls. He's able to support the midfield. And I think that's really important when off the back, when I mentioned those changes to the ruck rule and how you're not really looking at crafty taps anymore. You're looking at physicality. You're looking at contest, impact around the ball, and then you're looking at transition as well. And him operating as a kicker as well, that's something that you don't see a lot in modern day ruckmen. Even the really athletic ones with that same physicality, like a Tom De Koning, he doesn't kick the football necessarily particularly well. He's not finding passes. He's decent in that area, but I think Cooper Duff-Tytler takes that to an entirely new level with being this combative sort of ruckman on the inside of the contest and then being able to bring the ball from inside to out as a midfielder. I think that can be a huge weapon for AFL teams. At this stage of the season, with only a few games being played at the beginning, he's just looking like such a high upside player. Not even necessarily when you're thinking about that ruck position. I want you to take that ruck position at the moment just away for a second and just think about him as an athlete and as a player that you're bringing into your club. I think that's how you've got to look at this with Cooper Duff-Tytler and not just purely the position. You're talking about a guy here that even if he was just playing as a key position forward, can operate as that marking target, that absolute number one key guy, but also be able to find the ball at ground level as well. If he has to, he can go into that roving mode, that crumbing mode. And I think that's, again, just the point of difference that he brings. And comparing him to AFL players like Sam Darcy, these sorts of robots really in the way that they're able to do so many different things. It's just a new level of hybrid. So in conclusion here, I think it's really important that we split Cooper Duff-Tytler, the player and the athlete. We separate that from the ruck position, which I don't necessarily think you do want to be taking that position with the number one pick. But when the right athlete comes along, I think you've got to make that decision. Consider him more of a utility, an extra midfielder, but as well as that, a potential gun key position forward as well. Someone that can even fulfill that second ruck role, something that teams have been struggling to fill recently. If he can be that number one key position forward inside forward 50, get up and help out as a second ruck. Lots of teams are struggling with that at the moment. So I think that would be huge for, teams like West Coast that are down the bottom, teams like Richmond. They're going to have such an advantage in that position and just have a great player overall that can do lots of different things. So let me know, guys, what would you do? Would you not want to waste a number one draft pick on the ruck position? Or would you take the position out of it completely like I've sort of explored in this video and just look at Cooper Duff-Tytler, the athlete? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you in the next video.